I was still cocooned in my bathrobe, halfway through the sacred ritual of my first cup of coffee, when the flash of crimson caught my eye. A bright red tag flapped defiantly on my front gate, a scarlet flag of suburban warfare. Notice of violation. It screamed in aggressive block letters. Unauthorized use of private recreational facility. I blinked twice, convinced residual sleep fog was playing tricks, but nope. There it was, my pool, my perfectly legal, privately owned pool, gleaming innocently in my own backyard. Somehow cited for existing, the sheer absurdity would have been comical if it weren't 6:42 a.m. And if this wasn't the third time this week Karen Hayes had found a novel way to crawl under my skin with her clipboard and that infuriatingly smug grin. The first incident had been almost quaint in its pettiness. A sharp rap on the door, Karen standing there with a printed HOA pamphlet, clearly homemade, in one hand and a measuring tape in the other. "Good morning," she chirped, far too brightly for someone about to measure a neighbor's water level. "Are you aware the water level of your pool is approximately 1.8 inches higher than the Community Visual Uniformity Guidelines? Are you measuring evaporation rates now too, Karen?" She hadn't even cracked a smile, just circled something ominously on her clipboard and informed me a formal notice was in the works. I brushed it off as harmless territorial marking. That was mistake number one. Mistake number two was assuming she wouldn't escalate. Karen had recently, and unilaterally, declared herself chairwoman of the neighborhood's HOA Compliance Committee, an unofficial position, mind you, created entirely within the echo chamber of her own mind. No one else had applied. No one else even knew it existed until she started holding meetings in her meticulously organized garage. She didn't own a projector. She used her iPad, passing it around the sparse, gathering like some sacred scroll inscribed with bylaws she'd likely drafted herself, illustrated with blurry cell phone photos of perceived infractions. Sighing, I walked down the dew-damp lawn, snatched the offending red notice off the gate, and read the fine print. It claimed, in tortured legalese, that any utilization of aquatic facilities potentially disturbing the auditory and/or visual peace of the neighborhood must be pre-approved by HOA consensus. I stared at the line, truly baffled. Pre-approved? To swim? In my own pool? I checked the envelope again. Maybe a prank? Nope. Her signature, a self-important scrawl, adorned the bottom. Karen H., acting committee chair. There was even a hand-drawn smiley face next to her name. Who adds a smiley face to a violation notice? What made this exponentially worse was the pool wasn't even in use. No raucous parties, no cannonballing kids. The only recent disturbance might have been the gentle plink of water droplets during my solitary evening swims, usually conducted in near silence under the stars. And yet, here I was, violation number one, existing with water on my property. I stared across the yard at the pool, steam rising gently from its surface in the cool morning air, and felt something shift inside me. A tiny, distinct click, the sound of chronic irritation hardening into something colder. Not anger, not yet. Strategy. I retreated to the back deck, coffee still clutched like a lifeline, and sank into my Adirondack chair. My golden retriever, Lucky, padded out, emitting a soft groan as he settled beside me, as if he too was weary of Karen's crusade. I scratched behind his ears. "So," I muttered mostly to him, "she wants to play HOA. Okay, Lucky, let's play." I didn't inherently hate HOAs. Some provided useful structure, but this one, largely fueled by Karen's boundless energy for micromanagement, was different. This was the kind of place where a neighbor's choice of marigold color could ignite a passive-aggressive email chain, where hedges were measured with laser precision, and where Gary down the street once got written up because his seasonal wreath supposedly clashed with established neighborhood tones. The truth was simple. Karen didn't care about the pool. She cared about control. She yearned to curate every square inch of her surroundings like her own personal, obsessively detailed diorama. My phone buzzed. A message from Dan from 2 doors down. Just last week, Karen had tried to fine him for grilling burgers in his front yard, claiming the aroma of smoked brisket constituted an airborne olfactory nuisance. He'd laughed it off then, but her persistence was becoming less amusing and more invasive. She was slowly poking her way into everyone's daily routines like a splinter. Small, sharp, and impossible to fully ignore. Around 10 a.m., I heard the telltale clack-clack of her garden clogs on her driveway concrete. My kitchen window was slightly open. I could hear her humming some vaguely self-righteous tune as she meticulously watered her identical terracotta flower pots. I watched as she paused, her gaze sweeping my yard, inevitably snagging on the bright blue shimmer of the water. She squinted, scribbled something on her ever-present clipboard, then glanced around furtively, checking for witnesses. I didn't hide. I simply took another sip of coffee and gave her a slow, lazy wave from my deck chair. She didn't wave back, just pursed her lips and clacked away. That afternoon, an email landed in my inbox from the HOA general account. Likely just Karen's personal Gmail with a fancy signature. An invitation to a special committee meeting, hosted, naturally, at Karen's house. Topic: excessive pool use violations and associated environmental concerns. Date: tomorrow evening. I nearly choked on my iced tea. Environmental concerns? Was she going to accuse my pool of contributing to glacial melt next? I forwarded the email to Dan. You coming to this circus? His reply was instantaneous. A screenshot of an overflowing bucket of popcorn emoji. Front row seat. The text read. The next evening, I walked into Karen's garage, bracing myself. She had indeed transformed it into a makeshift tribunal hall. 3 folding chairs faced a whiteboard where Karen H. Chair was underlined 3 times in red marker. A tray of suspiciously pale, sugar-free cookies sat forlornly on a plastic table. Karen stood at the front, beaming with authority, flipping through a stack of printed photos. Blurry shots of my pool at dusk. A zoomed-in picture of an inflatable flamingo I hadn't used in months. One particularly artistic shot that looked suspiciously like I might have sneezed while doing laps. She launched into a monologue, her voice earnest, about how personal pools, if left unchecked, could disrupt the aesthetic harmony and contribute to ambient noise pollution. I watched Dan trying, valiantly, not to smirk. Another neighbor, Mrs. Gable, coughed loudly to cover a chuckle. Karen, utterly oblivious, presented a hand-drawn chart comparing water features across the community. My pool, apparently, was 30% more reflective than the neighborhood median. That was the moment I fully grasped it. She wasn't just annoying. She was pathologically obsessive. When she paused dramatically to adjust her slides, the photos taped to the whiteboard, I stood up. Calmly, measuredly. Karen, I asked, my voice even, what exactly would you like me to do with the pool? Drain it? Fill it with sand? Convert it into a parking space? She stared, lips pursed, clearly suspecting a trap. Then, after a moment's calculation, she replied, her voice regaining its authoritative tone. I just want you to comply. Recreational use requires pre-approval. And that was it. The confirmation I needed. I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. I nodded. Okay, Karen. Understood. I'll make sure no one swims in it again. That night, I sat on my deck, the pool water glistening under the moonlight. Lucky rested his head on my knee. I opened my laptop, the screen's glow illuminating my face. I typed a simple query into the search bar. How to legally turn your backyard pool into a wildlife pond. The results scrolled across the screen, and I began to grin, wider than I had in weeks. If Karen wanted compliance, I'd give her compliance. More than she could possibly handle. Not by removing the pool, but by transforming it into something that followed all the rules and absolutely none of her expectations. The game was on. The morning after Karen's garage tribunal, I woke feeling strangely serene. It wasn't the peace of resolution, but the quiet hum of a decision made. I was done playing defense. Karen, her clipboard, her made-up bylaws, they no longer mattered in the way they had before. This wasn't just about a pool anymore. It was about reclaiming my space, my sanity, and flipping this absurd script. And the beauty of it? I wouldn't break a single rule. In fact, I planned to embrace the rules, wrap myself in them so tightly it would suffocate Karen with her own beloved red tape. After coffee, the calls began. First, my cousin Rob, an environmental landscaper with a healthy disdain for petty tyrants. "Let me guess," he answered. "HOA trouble?" I didn't need to elaborate. "I want to convert the pool," I explained, "into a legal wildlife pond. Not just decorative. A functioning, frog-filled, state-recognized eco-haven." Rob was silent for a beat, then burst out laughing. "You, my friend, are a special kind of genius." He assured me permits likely weren't necessary, provided I stuck to native species and followed basic environmental guidelines. Hours vanished into a vortex of online research. Frog ponds, aquatic plants, balanced ecosystems, dechlorination methods. Forums teemed with nature lovers who'd undertaken similar projects out of genuine ecological passion. My motivation was admittedly less noble, but the outcome would be the same. Lawful, environmentally protected, aesthetically debatable success, right under Karen's perpetually twitching nose. By noon, armed with a list, I was at a sprawling local nursery. Water lettuce, duckweed, native reeds, water hyacinths, plants chosen for oxygenation, shade, and their ability to thrive in still water. The cashier, a woman with dirt under her fingernails and wisdom in her eyes, raised an eyebrow at my chlorinated pool to frog pond explanation. When I briefly outlined the Karen situation, she laughed so hard she nearly toppled a display of biodegradable pots. "Give him hell, honey," she winked, bagging my purchases. Back home, the transformation began. Shutting off the whirring filtration system felt symbolic. Draining half the water took hours, but each receding gallon felt like reclaiming stolen peace. I scrubbed the concrete liner, neutralized the lingering chlorine with pond-safe treatments, and began arranging the plants. Large stones became ledges and hiding spots. Slowly, the familiar blue rectangle started morphing into something wilder, more like a strange, contained marsh. It wasn't traditionally pretty, not yet, but it pulsed with potential. I stood at the edge as dusk fell, imagining Karen's face. I didn't have to wait long. 8:03 a.m. the next day, punctual as ever, there she was, peering over the fence like a judgmental meerkat. I heard the gasp, sharp, theatrical, the sound of someone witnessing sacrilege. She stormed around to the side gate, rattling it impatiently. I let her wait a minute, savoring the small victory, before opening it with my brightest, most neighborly smile. "Morning, Karen. Lovely day." Her eyes, wide with horror, scanned the murky water and floating greenery. What is happening to your pool?" "Oh, that," I replied, my voice sweet as honeysuckle. "It's not a pool anymore. It's a frog pond now. Much better for the environment, you know. Conserving water, encouraging biodiversity." Her eye twitched violently. "You can't just turn your pool into a swamp." I chuckled softly. "It's not a swamp, Karen. It's a certified natural water garden. Native species, chemical-free, very eco-conscious." I saw the clipboard appear as if by magic. She started scribbling furiously. I leaned in conspiratorially. "If you're filing a complaint, make sure you mention it's wildlife positive. Might help expedite the paperwork." She spun on her heel, muttering about health hazards and property values, and retreated. She was just getting started, but so was I. Over the next few days, the pond evolved. A small wooden basking platform appeared. A tiny, solar-powered fountain added a gentle ripple. Native snails, nature's little cleanup crew, were introduced. Rob dropped by with a netted container buzzing with life, tadpoles. Releasing them into the shallow end felt momentous. It was official. This was a pond. Legally defensible, morally satisfying, and utterly, beautifully Karen-proof. Then came her next compliance meeting. Dan relayed the details. Karen, armed with a new slideshow, focused on the floating duckweed, arguing it was a mosquito breeding ground. But Rob had prepped me. I'd already printed educational pamphlets, readily available online, explaining how healthy frog ponds reduce mosquito populations by providing natural predators. I casually handed them out to inquiring neighbors before the meeting. Karen's argument deflated like a cheap pool toy. A few neighbors, weary of her antics, started voicing cautious support for the pond. Susan from across the street stopped me while walking her dog. "I think it's beautiful what you're doing," she said quietly. "My kids love trying to spot the tadpoles." That small validation hit harder than expected. This bizarre feud was accidentally creating something good? Karen, however, remained undeterred. That evening, she knocked again. Her demeanor shifted to oily politeness, the kind that precedes bad news wrapped in diplomatic ribbons. "I just wanted to inform you," she began, that tight-lipped smile firmly in place, "that the HOA board is considering new guidelines regarding personal water features." I nodded slowly, letting the silence hang. "That's interesting, Karen. I wonder how they'll reconcile those with the state's Environmental Advisory Board regulations." Her eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" I produced another printout, this time from the state's official website. "According to this," I said, pointing to the relevant section, "any body of water repurposed for the encouragement of native species falls under the Urban Wildlife Encouragement Act. It's actually protected. Tampering with a designated habitat like this carries significant fines." Her mouth fell slightly open. I pressed my advantage, tone still pleasant. "If you'd like, I can give you a tour later? Show you where the tadpoles are thriving." She turned wordlessly and fled. That night, sitting by the water's edge, watching ripples spread under the moon, I heard it. A single, tentative croak. The frogs were coming. It was only a matter of time. Just like Karen's breaking point. I didn't need to shout, scheme, or fight. I just needed nature, patience, and a pond full of soon-to-be vocal allies.